You know, I want to tell you about something that happened to me years ago that completely changed the way I see the world. I was sitting in my study late one evening, just like you might be sitting right now, and I was thinking about all the people I'd met over the years. Successful people, struggling people, happy people, miserable people. And I suddenly realized something so obvious, so simple, that I almost laughed out loud at how I'd missed it for so long. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail, between those who live with joy and those who live in quiet desperation, isn't what you might think. It's not their education, though that helps. It's not their background or their connections or even their talent, though those things matter too. The real difference, the only difference that truly matters, is what they think about most of the time. Now, I know that sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? You might be thinking, come on, Earl, surely there's more to it than that. But stay with me here, because what I'm about to share with you is going to sound simple on the surface, but when you really understand it, when you really let it sink into your bones, it will change everything. You see, we become what we think about. That's it. That's the secret that's been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. Marcus Aurelius knew it when he said that our life is what our thoughts make it. Buddha knew it. Every great teacher throughout history has pointed to this same truth. We become what we think about. But here's what most people don't understand. They hear that and they nod their heads and they say, oh yes, positive thinking, I've heard about that. And then they go right back to their old ways of thinking. Because they don't really get it. They don't understand that this isn't just some nice idea or some motivational poster you hang on your wall. This is a law, as reliable as the law of gravity. It works whether you believe in it or not. It's working in your life right now, this very moment, whether you're aware of it or not. Think about a farmer for a moment. If a farmer goes out to his field and plants corn, what's going to come up? Corn, right? He's not going to get wheat, he's not going to get tomatoes, he's going to get corn because that's what he planted. Now, the land doesn't care who plants the seed. It doesn't care if you're rich or poor, black or white, young or old. The land will return what you plant. It's completely impartial. Your mind works exactly the same way. Whatever seeds you plant in your mind, whatever thoughts you allow to take root and grow, that's what's going to show up in your life. And here's the thing that's so important to understand. Your mind doesn't care what you plant either. It will return whatever you put into it. Plant thoughts of success, thoughts of abundance, thoughts of joy, and that's what you'll get. Plant thoughts of failure, thoughts of lack, thoughts of worry and fear, and that's what you'll harvest. Most people are walking around planting the wrong seeds all day long and then wondering why their lives aren't working out. They wake up in the morning already thinking about everything that could go wrong. They drive to work thinking about how much they hate their job. They come home and spend their evening worrying about money or complaining about their circumstances. And then they look around at their lives and they say, why is this happening to me? But they don't realize they're the farmer. They're the ones who planted those seeds. Every thought is a seed. Every criticism, every complaint, every excuse, those are seeds too. And the mind doesn't care whether the seed will bring you roses or thorns. It just grows what you plant. I remember reading about a study done with two groups of salespeople. Both groups had the same training, the same territory, the same product. But one group was told to write down, every evening, 3 things that went wrong that day. The other group was told to write down 3 things that went right. After 30 days, the difference was staggering. The group focused on what went wrong, their sales dropped, their attitude soured. They started dreading their work. The group focused on what went right, their sales increased by nearly 40%. Same people, same opportunity, different seeds. You see, your mind doesn't distinguish between what you times want, times to think about, and what you're times choosing, times to think about. It just processes whatever you feed it. And then it goes to work, automatically, to make your dominant thoughts become your reality. That's why people who constantly worry about money rarely have enough. That's why people who talk about their health problems usually have more of them. That's why people who say, I'm always so unlucky, keep running into bad luck. They think they're just describing their lives, but they're actually creating them. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if this principle works in the negative, and we all know it does, then it must work just as powerfully in the positive. What if, instead of worrying about what might go wrong, you spent that same mental energy imagining what could go right? What if, instead of rehearsing past failures, you rehearsed future successes? What if you treated your mind like the incredibly powerful tool it actually is, instead of like a garbage dump for every negative thought that drifts by? I'll tell you what would happen. The same thing that happens when a farmer plants corn instead of weeds. You'd get a different harvest. But here's what stops most people. They try it for a day, maybe a week, and they don't see immediate results. So they quit. They say, "See, positive thinking doesn't work." But imagine that farmer again. He plants his corn in April. Does he go out there in May and complain that there's no harvest? Does he dig up the seeds to check if they're growing? Does he give up in June because he hasn't seen results yet? Of course not. He knows times there's a growing season. He knows the seeds are doing their work underground, invisible, until the right time comes. Your thoughts work the same way. There's a gestation period between planting and harvest, between cause and effect, between what you think and what you see. Most people never make it to harvest season because they don't understand this. They plant good seeds on Monday, then dig them up on Tuesday because nothing happened yet. They're looking for instant proof, instant validation. But that's not how life works. That's not how success works, and it's certainly not how the mind works. Think about it like this. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't stand there tapping your foot, checking your watch, demanding to see results. You understand there's a natural process happening beneath the surface. The seed is absorbing moisture. It's beginning to crack open. Roots are forming, reaching down into the soil. All of this is happening in the darkness, where you can't see it. Your thoughts work the same way. When you plant a clear, definite goal in your mind and you tend to it daily with focused thought and action, something is happening beneath the surface of your conscious awareness. Your subconscious mind is going to work. It's making connections. It's guiding you toward opportunities. It's preparing you for the success you've claimed. But most people panic during this invisible stage. They don't see immediate results, so they assume nothing is happening. They abandon the goal. They switch to something else. They start over with a different seed, and the cycle repeats. This is why consistency beats intensity every single time. You see, it's better to think about your goal for 10 minutes every single day than to think about it for 5 hours one day and then forget about it for the rest of the month. Because it's the daily repetition that programs your subconscious mind. It's the consistent action that builds momentum. Let me give you a real-world example. Let's say you decide you want to write a book. That's your harvest. Now, most people will get excited about this idea for a few days. They might even write a chapter or two. But then life happens. They get busy. They get discouraged. They wonder if it's any good. They stop writing. A few months later, they come across someone who's just published their first book, and they think, "I wish I could do that. I wish I had their talent, their discipline, their opportunity." But here's what they don't see. That author didn't write their book in a burst of inspiration. They wrote it sentence by sentence, page by page, day after day, even when they didn't feel like it. Especially when they didn't feel like it. They understood the gap. They knew there would be days, maybe weeks, where it felt like they were getting nowhere. But they kept planting seeds, they kept watering them, and eventually, inevitably, the harvest came. This principle applies to everything. Your career, your relationships, your health, your financial situation, everything. You want to double your income? You can. But you're going to have to hold that vision in your mind and take consistent action toward it, even when your bank account looks exactly the same as it did last month. That's the gap. That's the test. You want to transform your body? You can. But you're going to have to keep showing up to exercise and eating right even when the scale hasn't moved and you don't see any visible changes yet. That's where most people quit. Right before the breakthrough? Here's what I've learned after studying success for decades. The people who make it, the ones who actually achieve their goals, aren't necessarily more talented than everyone else. They're not smarter. They don't have better opportunities handed to them. What they have is faith in the gap. They trust the process. They understand that cause and effect is always working, even when they can't see the evidence yet. They know that if they keep planting good seeds and tending to them, the harvest is guaranteed, not hoped for, guaranteed. This is a law of nature. You can't plant corn and get weeds. You can't think successful thoughts, take consistent action, and somehow end up with failure. It doesn't work that way. And yet, how many people do you know who are planting corn, or think they are, but keep getting weeds? They say they want success, they talk about their dreams at parties, maybe they even read a few books on the subject. But when you look at what they're actually doing, day in and day out, it tells a different story entirely. They're planting weeds and wondering why corn won't grow. See, the soil doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't respond to what you wish or hope or say you're going to do someday. It only responds to what you actually plant. And most people, if they're honest with themselves, aren't planting much of anything at all. They spend their mornings rushing through breakfast, their minds already cluttered with worry. They drive to work, listening to news designed to make them anxious. They spend 8 or 10 hours doing work they don't believe in, then come home exhausted and numb themselves with television until it's time to sleep. Then they wake up and do it all over again. And they wonder why their garden isn't flourishing. You see, success isn't just about the big dramatic actions. It's not about that one great idea or that perfect moment when everything clicks into place. Success is about the quality of your daily routine. It's about what you're doing between the alarm clock and the pillow. It's about whether you're moving toward something or just drifting. I knew a man once, let's call him Robert, who spent 20 years complaining about his job. 20 years. He was talented, capable, had ideas that could have changed his entire industry. But every single day he chose comfort over growth. He chose the familiar over the possible. He chose to stay where he was because the thought of change, the uncertainty of it, felt worse to him than the certainty of being miserable. And then one day his company downsized, they let him go, and you know what happened? Within 6 months, he'd started his own consulting business. Within a year, he was making more money than he'd ever made in his life. Within 2 years, he told me it was the best thing that ever happened to him. But here's the tragedy. He didn't need to be pushed. He could have jumped at any point during those 20 years. The only thing that changed wasn't the market or his skills or the opportunities available. The only thing that changed was that he finally had no choice but to plant different seeds. Don't wait until you have no choice. Don't let life push you into the garden. Walk in voluntarily while you still have time, while you can still choose what to plant. Because here's something else that's true about this law. Time compounds everything. Good seeds planted today will yield a harvest that provides seeds for tomorrow. Those seeds, planted and tended, will yield an even greater harvest. Success builds on success. Growth accelerates growth, but the opposite is also true. Neglect compounds just like interest. Every day you don't plant is a day you won't harvest. Every week you drift is a week you'll never get back. The man who wastes a year doesn't just lose a year, he loses everything that year could have built for the next 10. This is why starting now matters so much. Not tomorrow, not Monday, not after the holidays or when things settle down or when you feel more ready. Now, today, this moment. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need the perfect plan or the ideal circumstances. You just need to plant one seed. Take one action that's aligned with where you want to go. One small step in the right direction. And here's the miracle when you take that one action, the next step reveals itself. When you make that first phone call, suddenly you know who to call next. When you write that first page, the second page becomes clearer. When you have that difficult conversation, the path forward opens up. Success is sequential, not simultaneous. You don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need to take the first step, and then the next, and the next. I learned this lesson watching a sculptor friend of mine work on a massive piece of marble. I asked him, "How do you know what to carve? How do you see the finished piece in that giant block?" He smiled and said, "I don't see the whole thing at once. I just remove one piece that doesn't belong, then another, and slowly what's meant to be there emerges." That's exactly how you build the life you want. You don't need the complete blueprint. You need the courage to chip away at what doesn't belong and add what does, one decision at a time. Now, let me tell you something that might surprise you. The biggest obstacle between you and where you want to be isn't lack of talent, it isn't lack of opportunity, it isn't even lack of time, it's the stories you keep telling yourself. I'm too old to start now. I don't have the right education. People like me don't do things like that. I've already tried and failed. What will people think? These stories become prison bars. And the tragedy is, You're both the prisoner and the jailer. You built the cell with your own words, and you hold the key. Every single day, people just like you, with the same fears, the same doubts, the same limitations, are breaking through those stories and creating something remarkable. The only difference is, they stopped believing the narrative that said they couldn't. I once interviewed a woman who started her own business at 67 years old. 67. After retiring from a 30-year career in teaching, she could have spent her days in a rocking chair. Instead, she spent them building something she'd always dreamed of. When I asked her what changed, she said something profound. I realized the story I'd been telling myself about being too old was just that, a story. And I could write a different one. She's now 74. Her business employs 12 people and serves hundreds of customers. All because she picked up a new pen and wrote a new story. What story have you been telling yourself? What narrative have you accepted as unchangeable truth when it's really just a habit of thinking? Because here's what I know after decades of studying success: your life will never rise higher than the story you tell yourself about what's possible. If your story says, "I'm not the kind of person who succeeds at this," then you'll unconsciously sabotage every opportunity that comes your way. You'll prove yourself right, even though being right means staying stuck. But if you change the story, if you start saying, "I'm exactly the kind of person who can learn this, who can grow into this, who can become this," everything shifts. Your brain starts looking for evidence to support that new story. And it finds it. You start noticing opportunities you would have missed before. You start taking actions you would have avoided before. You start becoming someone you couldn't have imagined before. This isn't positive thinking nonsense. This is understanding how the human mind works. We move toward whatever we focus on. We become whatever we consistently think about. So ask yourself right now, what's the dominant story in my mind? Am I the hero who overcomes obstacles, or the victim of circumstances? Am I someone who's becoming, or someone who's stuck? Because here's what I've discovered after decades of studying human potential. The story you tell yourself becomes the lens through which you see every opportunity, every setback, every person you meet. If your story is, "I'm not the kind of person who gets lucky breaks," then when opportunity knocks, you won't even hear it. You'll be too busy reinforcing your narrative. Someone will offer you a chance, and you'll find a reason why it won't work for you. Not because the opportunity isn't real, but because it doesn't fit your story. But if your story is, "I'm someone who recognizes and seizes opportunities," then you'll spot them everywhere. The same situation that one person walks past you'll see as a doorway. It's not that you have better circumstances, you have a better story. I once knew a man who grew up in poverty, dropped out of school in the 8th grade, and by all accounts should have lived and died in obscurity. But his mother told him a different story. She told him he had a gift for seeing what others couldn't see. She told him that his humble beginnings were actually an advantage because they taught him to be resourceful. And do you know what happened? That boy internalized that story. When other people saw obstacles, he saw puzzles to solve. When others saw closed doors, he looked for windows. He became one of the most successful entrepreneurs in his city, not because he had more talent or better connections, but because he had a better story. The story you're living right now, is it one you consciously chose, or is it one that was handed to you by your circumstances, your family, your past failures, because you have the power to rewrite it? Not by denying reality, but by changing what reality means to you. That setback you experienced last year, what story have you wrapped around it? Is it evidence that you're a failure, or proof that you had the courage to try something difficult? Is it a reason to stop, or information to help you course correct? The same event, two completely different stories, and whichever story you choose will determine whether you try again or give up. Here's something most people never realize. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a story you're consciously telling yourself and one that's running on autopilot. If you're not deliberately choosing your narrative, your subconscious is writing it for you, and I promise you, your subconscious is using old material, outdated beliefs, childhood fears, things people said to you decades ago. You become what you think about, and you think about whatever story is playing in your mind most consistently. So, let me give you something practical you can do today, right now. Take inventory of the stories you tell about yourself. Not just to others, but to yourself in the quiet moments. When you explain why something didn't work out, What story do you tell? When you imagine your future, what role are you playing in that story? Are you the protagonist who acts, or the supporting character who reacts? Are you the creator of your life, or the victim of it? And here's the beautiful part. The moment you become aware of your story, you can begin to change it. You don't need permission. You don't need to wait for your circumstances to improve. You can start rewriting your narrative today by choosing different words, different interpretations, different meanings. That's what separates people who transform their lives from people who stay stuck. It's not willpower. It's not even talent. It's the willingness to tell themselves a different story. And that story doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be revolutionary. It just has to be time's true asterisk. I remember meeting a woman at a seminar years ago, let's call her Margaret. She'd spent 30 years working in a factory, repetitive work, honest work, but work that had ground her down into thinking she was ordinary, forgettable, just another cog in a vast machine. She'd told me, "Earl, I don't have anything special to offer." I asked her one question: "What do people always come to you for?" She thought for a moment. "Well, people do ask me to help them organize things, their schedules, their projects. I don't know why, but they say I make complicated things simple." There it was, right there, hidden in plain sight. That ability to take complexity and make it clear, that's not ordinary. That's a gift. And once she saw it, once she gave herself time's permission, times to see it, everything changed. She started a small consulting business, helping local companies streamline their operations. Last I heard, she was doing quite well. But here's what I want you to understand. Margaret didn't suddenly develop a new skill. She didn't go back to school or reinvent herself from scratch. She simply stopped telling herself the story that she had nothing to offer. She looked at what was already there, acknowledged it, and built on it. You see, most of us are carrying treasures we refuse to recognize. We're standing on gold mines while convincing ourselves we're in a desert, and the tragedy isn't that we lack ability. The tragedy is that we've been taught to overlook our own. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. But Earl, what if I really don't have anything special? What if I'm genuinely ordinary? Let me be direct. That's impossible. Biologically impossible. Mathematically impossible. You are the product of millions of years of evolution, shaped by a unique combination of experiences, perspectives, and circumstances that will never be repeated. Even identical twins diverge in how they see and interact with the world. The question isn't whether you have something unique to offer. You do. The question is whether you're willing to look for it. Whether you're willing to stop dismissing the things that come easily to you simply because they come easily. We make this mistake constantly. We assume that if something isn't difficult for us, it must not be valuable. We think, oh, anyone could do that, when in reality, they can't. They don't see what you see. They don't think how you think. They don't connect the dots in the same pattern. I've watched engineers who can solve complex equations in their sleep completely miss the social dynamics in a room. I've seen artists who can capture emotion with a brushstroke struggle to balance a checkbook. I've met salespeople who can read a person's needs in 30 seconds but couldn't write a coherent paragraph to save their lives. None of these people are better or worse than the others. They're simply time's different asterisk. And that difference, that specific combination of abilities and blind spots, is precisely what makes each person irreplaceable in certain contexts. Your job isn't to be good at everything. Your job is to find the places where your particular combination of talents creates value that nobody else can provide in quite the same way. Think about it like this. Imagine a jigsaw puzzle with 10,000 pieces. Each piece has a unique shape. Now, you could spend your whole life wishing you were a different piece, a corner piece maybe, or one with more vibrant colors. But the puzzle doesn't need another corner piece. It needs times your times piece, in times your times spot. And until you show up and fit into that space, there's a hole, an incompleteness, a gap that nobody else can fill. That's what your uniqueness is. It's not about being better. It's about being time's necessary asterisk. And when you become necessary, something extraordinary happens. The world stops comparing you to others because their times are times no others doing what you do the way you do it. Think about your favorite teacher. Maybe it was in 3rd grade, maybe in college. Close your eyes and picture them for a moment. Now ask yourself, why do they still live in your memory after all these years? Was it because they had the highest degree? Because they used the most advanced teaching methods? Or was it something else entirely? I'll tell you what it was. It was the way they times saw times you, the particular attention they paid, the specific encouragement they gave, the unique way they made a difficult concept suddenly clear. That teacher could have been replaced by someone with better credentials, more experience, more knowledge. But they couldn't have been replaced by someone who would have the same impact on times you asterisk, because what mattered wasn't just what they knew, it was who they times were asterisk. This is what I mean when I say your uniqueness makes you necessary. You don't have to be the smartest person in your field. You don't have to be the most talented. You don't even have to be the most hardworking, though that certainly helps. What you need to be is times authentic asterisk, fully yourself, bringing your whole story, your whole perspective, your whole heart to everything you do. Because somewhere out there, there's someone who needs exactly what you have to offer, in exactly the way you offer it. Let me share something that happened to me early in my career. I was working in radio, trying to sound like everyone else, trying to have the voice, the delivery, the style that I thought people wanted to hear, and I was adequate, just adequate. Nothing special. Then one day, out of sheer exhaustion, I stopped trying. I just talked, the way I actually talk, the way I think. And I shared something I genuinely cared about, in my own words, with my own inflection, at my own pace. The response was immediate, not from everyone, but from the people who needed to hear it that way. From the people who connected with times that times voice, asterisk that times approach, asterisk that times perspective. I wasn't better than the other broadcasters, but for those listeners, I was necessary. I was speaking their language. I was scratching an itch they didn't even know they had. This is the power of stepping into your uniqueness instead of running from it. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Earl, that's all well and good for creative work, but I'm an accountant. I'm an engineer. I'm in a field where there's a right way and a wrong way, where personality doesn't matter. And to that I say you're absolutely wrong. Even in the most technical field, your uniqueness matters. Because people don't just hire skills, they hire trust. They hire communication style. They hire the feeling they get when they work with you. Two accountants can both be technically excellent, but one explains things in a way that makes you feel confident and informed, while the other makes you feel stupid for asking questions. Which one becomes indispensable? Two engineers can both solve the problem, but one does it while building up the team, while the other does it while belittling everyone else's ideas. Which one gets promoted? Your technical skills might get you in the door, but your uniqueness, your character, your approach, your way of being, that's what makes you irreplaceable. And here's something else. Your uniqueness isn't just one thing, it's a combination. It's the intersection of your skills, your experiences, your values, your style, your interests. Maybe you're a marketing person who also loves psychology, or a lawyer who's passionate about environmental conservation, or a nurse with a background in music. These intersections, these unusual combinations, they're not distractions from your main path. They times your path. They're what make you different. They're what make you necessary. Think about it this way. Every master craftsman you've ever admired started as someone who couldn't hold the tools properly. Every surgeon who now saves lives once trembled during their first incision. Every pilot who flies through storms once gripped the controls with white knuckles during their first solo flight. What separated them from everyone else wasn't absence of fear. It was their refusal to let fear make the final decision. And here's something most people never realize. Your fear isn't trying to stop you, it's trying to prepare you. Fear is your ancient alarm system, and it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, alert you that something important is happening, that you're stepping beyond the familiar, that growth is occurring. The question isn't how to eliminate fear, it's how to interpret it correctly. When you feel that tightness in your chest, that voice saying, "Who do you think you are?" That's not a stop sign. That's your system recognizing that you're about to expand. You're about to become more than you currently are. And your brain, which is wired for survival and comfort, is sounding the alarm. But you, the conscious, choosing part of you, get to decide what that alarm means. Does it mean danger? Or does it mean growth? Most people interpret it as danger and retreat. They go back to what feels safe, what feels comfortable, what doesn't trigger that alarm. And in doing so, they ensure they'll hear that same alarm every single day for the rest of their lives. Because the alarm doesn't go away when you avoid it. It just moves to the next thing, and the next, and the next. The only way to expand the territory where you feel capable and confident is to step into the territory where you currently feel uncertain and afraid. Every single time you do something despite the fear, you reclaim a piece of ground. You expand your sense of what's possible. You prove to yourself that you can trust yourself in new situations. And gradually, remarkably, things that once terrified you become routine. The presentation that made your hands shake becomes just another Tuesday. The conversation you avoided for months becomes easier each time you have it. The creative work that felt impossibly vulnerable becomes your normal mode of expression. This is how you build a life worth living. Not by waiting until you feel ready, but by deciding that your purpose is more important than your comfort. Here's what I want you to remember. 10 years from now, you'll barely remember the fear you felt today. But you'll absolutely remember whether you moved forward anyway, or whether you let the fear choose your life for you. Your descendant self, the person you'll become a decade from now, is watching this moment. They're waiting to see what you'll decide. Will you give them a life of quiet regret, or will you give them a story of courage, growth, and meaning? The choice has always been yours. The path has always been available. The only question that remains is whether you'll trust yourself enough to take the next step. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to begin, right now, today, this moment. That's the message. That's the truth I've spent my life trying to share. You are capable of far more than you've allowed yourself to believe. Your fears are signposts, not barriers. Your purpose is waiting for you to claim it. The rest of your life begins with what you do next. Make it count.